Greeting everyone. So today is Thursday, July 16th, and we are hosting our Let's Connect. And today our featured speaker is attorney Louis Berk. And as many of you will know, is our third Thursday we have our Let's Connect, and part of your membership benefits is you get to host a Let's Connect. Typically, before COVID, we would have it at a particular organizational place of selected, but we transitioned to virtual. So our Let's Connect is being held virtually. But before we get started, let me share my screen, share a few things with you guys. A few announcements. As far as July 20th is the deadline to update or register to vote. As we're pushing for that, this is an election year. We want to make sure we are counted. We want to make sure our voice is counted as well, or we show our strength by voting. And for those of you that are here who may not be familiar with the chamber, I'll give you a quick overview as far as who we are. We founded in 2007. I'm Dr. Lebodom. I'm a physical therapist here, clinical director for Physical Therapy and Balance Center here in Orlando, West Orlando. But the chamber was founded in 2007, and I'm the president for the Haitian Chamber. Our main vision or strategic vision, I would say, is to be the organization that's dedicated to servicing the Orlando, Central Florida, Haitian American businesses, community through connectivity, business education, economic development, and access to leaders. But our mission, we want to, give me a second here. Oh, sorry, I got to go back. Okay. So our mission is to provide a network for Haitian American businessmen and women to support, to facilitate, and to foster economic development in the Orlando region and abroad. And we do that with four purposes. We want to facilitate the economic development. We want to provide resources, business development advice. We also want to promote trade between Haitian American businesses, different levels of government, and with other organizations within our reach. And last one, assist and train our members so they can establish their business, maintain their business, and help grow their business. And the benefits, again, connectivity, relationship building. Yes, we may have the skills, we may have the skills, the talent, but relationship matters. At one point, you will need someone to open the door for you. And if you don't have that relationship, if you have not invested in that, you may run into some troubles as well, as has been very evident during this pandemic. As you've seen, relationship matters with different opportunities, being aware and also being able to collaborate to be able to take those opportunities so you can better yourself, your organization, your community. Business credibility. So when you have a group of collected individuals or like-minded individuals who may advocate on your behalf, when they get to know you, trust you, know your craft, they can go and begin to advocate on your behalf so you can grow your business, so you can develop professionally as well. Value, resources, and training. I don't know it all. Many of us here don't know it all. We all have our own circle of influence. We all are experts in different fields, but yet under this umbrella collaboratively, we can begin to share that resource and leverage those resources. We have exposure and marketing visibility. Again, every organization, if you look at it, have an association they associate with. If you look at CPAs, if you look at realtors, if you look at bankers, there's attorneys, there's associations. So we, with the Greater Haitian American Chamber of Commerce, we solicit community members, simple citizens, to begin to organize, to begin to connect with this organization to represent our businesses, but yet the community as a whole. Again, the last one, to give back, opportunity to give back to your community. With all the knowledge that we have, the resource that we have, if we do not share it, Um, if we do not share with our community, if we do not share with the millennials or others of Generation X or Z's that are coming up, then we'll do ourselves a disservice because I'm not president forever. Someone else has to come up to the chain. So we want to make sure we impart what we have, share the resources we have, also build those relationships and bridge the gap. So for that, we encourage you to get connected with the chamber, bring your resources, share your talent so we can leverage and strengthen our community.
Let me just see record.
So give me just a second here as I navigate this terrain. So I'm gonna stop sharing. So tonight we have with us Tony Berk. A few of the topics we'll be covering is the state of PIP, but also our rights, and also when reviewing a document or legal document, a contract, basically, what are some things that you could look at or to be knowledge or to be aware of? So I'll share the screen to turn it over to Attorney Lewis Berk, and I'll let you do a formal introduction, and then we'll go on with the presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adler, and thank you everyone for being here tonight. It's really an honor. I love this organization. I mean, to get into this organization and align with like-minded individuals that are all for making this community a better place. I absolutely love going to these events, and honored to be this for tonight. So I actually prepared a PowerPoint. Let me see if I could. I think I got it right here. Okay. So tonight I wanted to, kind of cover a few different things about insurance industry. Let me start out by introducing myself. There's some of you that may know me, some of you may not know me. My name is Lewis Berk, and I'm the founder of Abogado Lewis, which is a law firm that specializes in personal injury here in Central Florida, and really we service people throughout the state of Florida. We focus primarily on plaintiff work, so we're the guys that go after the big bad insurance companies. And I've been practicing law. This is my 6th year. The first 4 years I worked at one of the big law firms here in Central Florida, and a couple years ago I decided to take my talents, like LeBron said, take my talents and open up my own practice. And definitely it allowed me to be able to service our community more and more. So first thing that I want to talk about is a brief history of PIP. So PIP originally was implemented in 1971, and the intent of PIP, which is personal injury protection, was to speed up claims, the payment also for medical bills. And everyone hears that PIP is, we're no-fault states, and Florida is actually one of 4 states left in the entire country that still uses the no-fault type of insurance. And the benefit of this is that you don't have to worry about determining who's at fault before an insurance company will cover you for your medical bills. And that was really the main reason why this was implemented in 1971. Literally every single year. It happened this year in 2020, happened last year in 2019, 2018. Pretty much every single year, you're going to have some people that want to repeal PIP, and you're going to have some people that want to keep PIP. And so the question really is PIP a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I'll let you guys kind of decide for that, on your own. But I want to discuss it a little bit, and you guys can kind of come up and really make your own decision of this is good or bad. But I want to give you a quick background of what PIP is and how PIP works. The first thing that's probably one of the most important things about PIP is that if you get involved in a car accident and you're injured as a result of that car accident, you must seek treatment in the first 14 days after that car accident, or you'll lose the benefits. What are the benefits? The benefits are $10,000 worth of medical bills and or lost wages. And the way that how PIP kind of falls under is it falls under three scenarios. And like anything in law, and I learned this when I was in law school, is that for every answer, even though you might have some definites, there's always the exception to the rule. And in this situation, there's also an exception to the rule. So number one, PIP falls under your own insurance policy. So if you're an insurance policy holder and you get rear-ended as a result, your own insurance is going to cover you for the first $10,000 of medical bills or lost wages, so through your PIP. So that's number one. That's usually, what covers, most people. But then you have situations where maybe you don't have insurance. Maybe you are, a 15-year-old kid and you are, or maybe 16 and you're riding around in a car, with one of your friends, and that car gets involved in an accident. So in that situation, what happened, right? So in that situation, if you live with somebody, a relative, and that relative has their own car insurance, then that would be the insurance that would cover you in a situation where you're involved in a car accident. And that's kind of where it gets a little bit funky, because if you think about it, if your child is involved in a car accident, based on PIP law and how the law is structured, your child, even if your child is not under your insurance policy, would fall under number two in this category, because he's not a policyholder. Obviously, the parent would be the policyholder, but he resides with a relative, the parents. So this would fall under him. So a lot of times, and I see this almost every day, where I have situations with parents and they're like, I don't want to use my PIP. I don't want my insurance to go up, right? It's one of the number one things that I always hear from parents. But according to state law, the PIP is going to fall under a relative if you're involved in an accident and you live with someone that does have PIP. Now, let's say that 1 and 2 is not valid. So what is my third option to be able to qualify under PIP benefits? And that would be the host vehicle. So let's go back to that example. Your 16-year-old child is involved in an accident with his friend. Now, his friend is not at fault. His friend, let's say he gets rear-ended. So number one, let's say that the 16-year-old does not have insurance. Or let's say he's 15. He's 15, he does not have insurance. So number one won't apply. Number two, let's say that the parents of this child, neither of them have a car, neither of them have car insurance. Okay, so it wouldn't fall under number one, because there's the 15-year-old kid does not have insurance. Number two, his parents, neither of them have insurance, so then he would fall under 3. The person who is in that vehicle that was driving and your child was a passenger in that vehicle, the host vehicle would be the vehicle that would cover the PIP in that specific situation. Again, these are questions that I get often, and if you want, if you have questions after this and you want to ask them, my door is always open, my phone is always open if you wanted me to clarify something like that. But that's essentially the 3 different types of people that PIP insurance covers. Now, like I mentioned before, there's always an exception, right? So the exception that I have delineated below is if you're a pedestrian and you don't fall under any of the above scenarios, then the at-fault driver would be the one that pays for your PIP insurance, would be paying for the first $10,000 of medical bills and or lost wages. So let me give you an example. A guy is crossing the street. He is riding a bicycle. He's riding a bicycle, crossing the street, and someone runs the red light. Someone hits the guy on the bicycle. The guy on the bicycle does not have insurance. So in that situation, the person that would cover his personal injury protection, his PIP, would be the guy that caused the accident, would be the guy that hit him in the situation. That is the only time that the at-fault driver's insurance company would cover someone under PIP. So what is covered? 80% of medical bills. So like I mentioned before, $10,000 is the maximum allowed under PIP in Florida law. Every state is a little bit different. There are some states that have 25,000 PIP, some states that have 50,000 PIP. In Florida, the maximum allowed for PIP benefits is $10,000. So what is covered? The bills are going to be covered at 80%, and lost wages, if you have lost wages, are going to be covered at 60%. So below, I also mentioned the maximum allowed is $2,500 if there's no emergency medical condition. Now, what is emergency medical condition? What does that mean? So in Florida, if you're not considered to have an EMC, an emergency medical condition, then your PIP benefits are capped at $2,500. If you are determined to have an emergency medical condition, then your PIP benefits are at the allowable $10,000. So what is an EMC and how does the EMC work? So an EMC, if you go into a hospital, most hospitals, if you're going to the emergency room right from the scene of the accident, the doctor's in the hospital and the doctor has to determine that you have an emergency medical condition. If a doctor, whether it's in the emergency room or in the course of medical treatment after an accident or after an injury, if they determine that you have an emergency medical condition, then that unlocks the cap, and then you're opening the door to getting up to $10,000 of medical benefits through PIP. If no doctor ever notes that you have an emergency medical condition, then your PIP benefits are capped at $2,500. So let me give you an example of the medical bills and the lost wages and kind of how that works. And I also mentioned it below in the bullet points. Let's say that you have a $1,000 bill. So your PIP benefits are going to cover you for 80% of that bill. So if you have a $1,000 bill from the hospital, your PIP is going to cover you for the $800. In this situation, what I would do is I would go the other 20% because it's still outstanding. I would go after the party that was responsible for the accident, for the allowable, or for the additional 20%. Same thing with lost wages. So let's say they make $100 a day and you lost time from work as a result of this accident. Well, in this situation, because PIP pays 60% of lost wages, it would reimburse you for $60 of that lost wages, and the other $40, the other 40%, we would go after the responsible parties in this accident. So the benefits, again, if you have the EMC, will be capped at $10,000. So once, if you have, 10 bills that are $10,000, that would be a total of 80%. So $8,000 of those bills would be covered. You would still have $2,000 available to make a claim. But once the $10,000 have been paid out, your PIP benefits are exhausted, and there's nothing more that you could get in terms of PIP benefits. So, so I mentioned this before, and I'm going to go back one slide real quick because I did mention before whether it is PIP, is it a good thing, is it a bad thing, and this is something that you want to kind of figure out and think to yourself. But I also want to go over what are the requirements in the state of Florida. So the minimum coverage is required in Florida, and I want to, this is kind of where we dive into the insurance, and I love explaining this and educating our community about the importance of really knowing what type of insurance you have, and I'm hopeful that right after, maybe even you're doing it right now, you're already looking at, all right, what do I have, Geico, State Farm, or whatever insurance company you have, and you're either going through your actual declarations page, or you're giving me a call and saying, hey, Lewis, can you help me figure out what I have? Because again, I want to make sure that you guys are covered. Here's the thing: if you're not covered with the appropriate insurance coverage, and then you get involved in car accidents, and then you call me, it's already too late to change your insurance policy. If you need to, up the limits or something like that, so you want to make sure that you're covered before the accidents happen. And this is why I love doing these types of conversations and talks, because it allows me to educate our community and make sure that they're prepared prior to any accidents happening. So again, what are the minimum coverages required in Florida? In Florida, we are required to have $10,000 of PIP coverage, which I explained in the last few slides, and $10,000 of property damage. Now, property damage, so you understand, covers the damages of the third person. So this does not cover our own property damage. So if you're carrying these minimum requirements and you don't have collision coverage, and you are responsible for hitting someone else's vehicle, and the insurance company determined that you are responsible for that accident, and you have these minimum coverages, that property damage is going to be your own responsibility, because you're not going to have collision coverage to cover your damages for your vehicle. So again, the property damage that you have in these minimum requirements are damages caused and damages to the third party, meaning someone else that you hit. And I say this a lot because I know that they sell these packages a lot, insurance companies. And again, I'm the biggest proponent, for educating our community and understanding what we have. A package that is called full coverage. And the term full coverage, right? It seems like, and people tell me this all the time, Lewis, don't worry, I got full coverage. And when people tell me full coverage, it is a package that insurance company sells to people all the time. And really what full coverage means is that you have full coverage based on Florida law. So full coverage based on Florida law is exactly what I mentioned above, which is you have $10,000 of coverage and you have $10,000 of property damage. So full coverage is essentially the most basic minimum coverage that you have based on Florida law. And again, it's something that I always like to educate people on, because if this is all you have and you cause someone else's accident, then you would be left holding the bag for having to repair your own vehicle. And if it's a vehicle where you're financing it, and it's a vehicle that you owe 5 or 10 grand on, and now it's a total loss, and you still owe 10 grand to the finance company, you can get into some issues with that. So let's go over a couple other things that you should have or you should know about when it comes to understanding your insurance policies. Bodily injury. Bodily injury is a coverage that covers the physical damage of the third person. Collision. Collision reimburses you, and this is something important to make sure that you have on your policy. Collision reimburses you for damage to your car that occurs as a result of a collision with another vehicle or other object. Comprehensive. This covers anything that collision doesn't cover. So theft, damage, vandalism, hail, falling rocks. I mean, if you're on the road, and I know this happens a lot, it's happened to me a couple of times where I'm on the road and like these big trucks are right in front of me, and then a piece of rock falls and it hits your glass. In the situation, your glass coverage will cover you. But if you have any other damage to your vehicle that is not glass related, your comprehensive coverage will cover you in this situation. Now, the next couple of ones are the ones that to me are some of the most important ones. This is additional coverage that I highly, I could say highly like 10, 15 more times. That's how much emphasis I want to put on this coverage, which is uninsured and underinsured motorists. And this covers you for physical damage and lost wages if the at-fault driver is uninsured, and I actually meant to put on here uninsured or underinsured. And the only way that you can add a coverage to your policy is if you have bodily injury coverage. So let's go back, if we went back to the slide before where I mentioned that we have, the basic coverage based on Florida, you would not be able to add uninsured motorists to this, your coverages, to your insurance coverages, because in order for you to be able to have uninsured motorists, you need to buy something that's called bodily injury. I mentioned in the next slide. So in order for you to buy uninsured motorists, you need to have bodily injury. And the way that uninsured motorist works is that you cannot have more coverage than bodily injury. Let me give you an example. I buy bodily injury coverage, and I buy bodily injury coverage of $100,000, let's say. So if I want to add uninsured motorist, that uninsured motorist I can buy up to bodily injury limit. So in this example, I can buy up to $100,000 of uninsured motorist coverage, but I could also buy less. I can't buy more. So I can't have 200,000 of UM coverage. I can't have more than bodily injury coverage. They have to be either the same or they have to be less. So that's really important. And this goes back to what I mentioned before, that the minimum coverage in Florida is, if we can go back here, minimum coverage is basic PIP and property damage. Let's create a little bit of an example right now. I'm driving a car, I get rear-ended, and I suffer injuries. Now, let's say that my injuries are serious enough that I need to go to the hospital. And we know the hospital bill, even if they see you for like 4 hours, that hospital bill is going to be like 15 grand. So right off the bat, your $10,000 of PIP is already got in a 4-hour visit to the hospital. So in that situation, the person who hit me has no bodily injury. Hit bodily injury is what would protect me in case my injuries are more than my PIP coverage is. So in this situation, this is why it's important. Not even important, but imperative. And this is why I stress it so much. You need to have uninsured motorists. And the reason is Florida law does not protect you or your family when it comes to someone having the right insurance coverages if you have injuries. So and listen, I see this every day. And this is why I'm so passionate about this, because I stress it so much, because if Florida law is not going to protect us or our family, and imagine if you have your 2 kids in the back seat and they're injured as well, and now you have each one of them has a $15,000 hospital bill. Those hospital bills don't say the person who hit you, right? They say your name on it. They say, Louis Berk, this is your bill. And if you don't pay those bills in 30, 60, 90 days, they're going to collection. And now we're talking about credit, which we can go on a completely different tangent on this. So this is why I stress the importance of having uninsured motorists, because bodily injury, which is the coverage that would cover you for physical damages and for lost wages, is not a requirement in the state of Florida. So to go back to my question before, do we like PIP, or do we think it's good, or do we think it's bad? Listen, in my opinion, I think that it's okay, but I think that not requiring people to carry bodily injury, I think that's where things need to change. Because if people are carrying bodily injury, at least even like $25,000 or $50,000 of bodily injury, then we know that no matter what, if someone rear ends us, if someone hits us, if someone causes an accident that causes injuries to us, that we're going to be protected. But since right now the law is the way the law is, this is why we need to have uninsured motorists. It's not even a recommendation where you may have it or you should have it. You must have it. There's just no way around it. Just because if the way that the law was written is not in our favor, it's not going to protect us, and we need to do whatever we have to do to protect ourselves and protect our family. That's just the bottom line. And again, that's why I'm so passionate about this, because I stress people the importance of having UM coverage. Again, because if you get involved in that car accident, you know for a fact, if you have even 25,000 of uninsured motorists, you know for a fact if the person hits you, that you're going to be covered no matter what. And there's a lot of areas in Central Florida that people are just driving around with basic coverage. That basic coverage is not going to cover you for your injuries. Another must have that I recommend is gap insurance. Now, I think if you finance your car, a lot of dealerships kind of force you to have gap insurance, and the reason why I say this is a must, and you'll see in my example that I put down below, and again, I see this often and it breaks my heart. It really breaks my heart because, in the example below, I put John owes $20,000 on his brand new car that's financed. He gets rear-ended. The car is a total loss. We all know once we take that car off the lot, that car is already depreciating right off the bat. So that car is now worth $12,000. And because it's a total loss, and let's say that John does not have gap insurance in this example, the $8,000 difference, which he financed, which is under John's name, is John's personal responsibility. Now, people ask me all the time, like, listen, if someone hit me, can I just go after them individually? Yeah, listen, you could always make a claim against somebody individually without a doubt. But if someone has no insurance, then you can go after them all day long. But if someone is uncollectible, they're uncollectible. What are you going to collect from someone that has zero money? They have nothing in the bank account. They're renting a room from somebody. So in that situation, again, these are the types of things that I love talking about. But I always stress that, we got to do whatever we have to do to protect ourselves and to protect our family. And when I educate people about their insurance policies and things like that, and people look at it and they realize, wow, you know what? I didn't know I had that coverage. Wow, you know what? I definitely going to add this right now. Or when someone calls me after an accident, and I spoke to them in the past, and then I'm like, listen, don't worry, obviously an accident is a very traumatic experience, but don't worry because I know you're covered because you changed your policy, so you're good to go, So that to me, again, I never wish an accident on absolutely anybody, but we live in Central Florida, and you know how crazy I-4 is. So, it's you have to do whatever you have to do to protect yourself and to protect your family. A little review of the insurance. Again, bodily injury is not required in Florida. Bodily injury is a protection that covers an individual or the third person in case of injuries. And aside from people not driving with bodily injury, there's people that are driving with no insurance at all whatsoever, or their insurance lapsed. So again, it's important to protect yourselves. And the way that you protect yourself is by buying coverage. Like I said, it's protect you and any family member in your home in case someone, hits you or, runs into your vehicle. And one of the things that I offer to anybody, it doesn't matter, where you are, my number is below, and I will go through your insurance. We will go step by step by step, and I will take a look at it, and I will tell you, hey, this is what you got. This is fantastic, or you need to up that insurance a little bit. And now I get asked this question all the time also, is my insurance going to go up if I add this coverage? And, the answer is absolutely. I mean, if you're going to add more coverage, it's going to cost you more money. So, don't go breaking the bank by adding, $1 million coverage if you can't afford it, but do something that you could afford and at the same time protecting your family. Even $10,000 of coverage is better than no coverage. So that's a little overview with, the car insurance and all that. And I wanted to talk about contracts because I know that especially in this Chamber of Commerce, there's a lot of business owners. And I know that you guys run into contracts all the time. I know I run into contracts all the time. So I wanted to, go over the importance of, reviewing the contracts, what terms to look at. And, so next time that you're entering into a contract, that you make sure that whatever you need to add into this contract, that it's there. So there's three basic tenets to creating a valid contract. And you need to have an offer, you need to have an acceptance, and you need to have consideration. The offer and the acceptance are referred to as meeting of the minds. And why do they call it meeting the minds? Because if I'm making an offer to purchase a good from you, right? And you're telling me this is the amount of goods that I can get for this amount of money, we're negotiating, we're going back and forth, we're trying to understand how much do I offer you in terms of money and how much are you going to give me in terms of goods, right? I mean, this happens all the time when even just going on Amazon, right? We go on Amazon and we're going to buy ink for a printer. all right, well, listen, it's $50 here, but $75 there. So you're meeting in the minds with, Amazon essentially, but you're still looking at different options in order for you to be able to purchase a good. And once you accept, right, once you go on Google, on Amazon, it says buy now, and you buy it, you follow through with it, boom, you've just created that contract with them. And the contract is, in exchange for money, I'm going to get ink cartridges, and the ink is going to be sent to me. And as soon as I receive it, boom, we created that contract, I received it, and we're good to go. But again, if the parties have not reached that threshold of agreement, then there's no enforceable contract. If we have, it's one of those things where, let's say you're looking to rent a property, and you're kind of going back and forth. Listen, I'll pay you $2,000, and the guy's like, no, I want $2,500, and you're going back and forth. And then, and even if they give you a contract, but you really haven't agreed on an actual price, there's no enforceable contract there. No one can go back to you and say that there was an enforceable contract, because there's no meeting of the minds, and there was no exchange of any money or anything like that. So the other portion that I wanted to talk about is the acts, the promises, the goods, the services, the money that you're going to exchange. All that stuff is the consideration. And in order to have that valid contract, you have to have all three. You can't just have the offer and the acceptance. You got to have the offer. You got to have the acceptance. So if I offer to pay you something, right? I offer, let's go to the ink cartridge again. I offered you $50 in exchange for the ink cartridge, but then I never give you the $50. Then there was never the consideration there. So there's got to have that consideration in order for that contract to be enforceable. You got to look at, contract law talks about this a lot. With the consideration, how do you benefit from entering into this contract? How do both parties receiving that consideration? Are you getting the money and I'm actually getting the cartridges? If you are, fantastic, we got valid consideration, and you just entered into an enforceable contract. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about is terms. So let's talk about terms, because terms are in contracts, and especially, again, if you're a small business owner and you don't want to go through the expense of hiring a lawyer, and it's a basic contract, like obviously, and let's say, if you're a small business owner, a lot of contracts that small business owners enter into is, let's say, office space. Office space, I think, is a general type of contract that a lot of people enter into, right? So you want to make sure that when the contract is given to you, that you identify that all the parties are there, all the right parties are there. Do you want that contract to be named in your name, or do you want it to be named in your corporation's name? So again, that's a question you got to think about in terms of identifying the correct parties in a situation. If it's a corporation and, listen, coronavirus is hitting, a lot of people are losing their businesses. I think we talked about that at the beginning of our chat today. Then maybe you do want it under that corporation, because if that corporation is going to go under, then there's no personal responsibility or liability on your behalf. So again, identifying the parties is such an important part of the contract. Defining the terms. Again, you want to make sure that you have clear terms in terms of what it is that you want to accomplish with this contract, in terms of what it is that you want to get as a result of this deal that you're making. So if it's rent, you want to make sure that if you're paying the same amount of rent, that all the terms in that contract is exactly the same. If you're putting X amount in terms of a deposit, you want to make sure that all the terms are delineated in the contract. The rights and responsibilities of each party. Again, with landlord-tenant type contracts, you see this all the time, right? I see it a lot with people that I work with as well. So if you're renting a property and for your business and the AC dies, whose responsibility is it to fix that AC? Is it your responsibility to maintain that property, or is it now the landlord's responsibility to maintain that property? This is so important. This is such a, these are key terms that you want to make sure that you're looking at when you are entering yourself into a contract. Because listen, I know personally from my father, he had a business, and when he had to repair the AC that broke down in the business, that was like a $5,000 expense. So, some of these expenses can be a really, really expensive expense that you're going to run into if you don't, put down the rights and responsibilities of each party. Remedy provisions. Remedy provisions are, how are you going to remedy if someone kind of falters from the contract, if someone breaches the contract? What are the remedies if you breach the contract? So that, again, is going to be really important. Hold harmless and indemnification provisions. This is also really important. Let's say that, someone is injured on their property. Let's say that something happens on your property. You want to make sure that these terms are really, really important, because if someone is going to try to sue the landlord, then, and there's no indemnification provision in the clause, then they're going to try to go after you as well. So if you make sure that you have these harmless and indemnification provisions that are looking good to protect yourself, protect your business. Causes for termination and resolution of disputes. This is also really important to look at. So in any contract that you enter into, you always want to almost think the worst, think the exit strategy, right? In every situation in business, you want to think exit strategy, right? Because you want to make sure that you're protected. So causes for termination. Let's say that, again, coronavirus is hitting. It's hitting a lot of people in a bad way. So what are some of the causes that I can use to terminate the actual contract? Is there any way that I can get out of this contract? If this is like, if you have some of these small businesses where you have a 2 or 3 year contract and your business is faltering in year 1, well, now you still owe 2 or 3 years of background. So how do I get out of this contract? Same thing with the resolution of disputes. A lot of people look into the resolution of disputes, and I'll talk about it in a couple of bullet points down, where the law that's governing in the jurisdiction, because if you're entering a deal into, let's say, a landlord-tenant type of deal with a company that's based in California, you got to look at the fine print and make sure that the law that's governing the actual contract is Florida law. If you live in Florida, you want Florida law to run that. You don't want California law or some other country to then, be the governing law in this type of situation. Signature lines. This is also super important. If there's no signatures, again, it's almost like the offer and acceptance, right? There's no signatures, there's never an acceptance of the contract. So there's no signatures, there's a possibility that there's no contract. And contract law is so deep. I mean, this is kind of like really more basic things, but contract law is so deep because there's things that you can enter into and contracts that you can enter into with no signatures, and almost be like an implied contract, which is a contract that is implied based on your actions. So again, it's not, and that's why I wrote down below that if there's no signature, it may be no contract. But if you're entering into a landlord-tenant type of contract, right, but there's no signature lines, but every month your rent's $2,000, and you've been paying $2,000 a month every month for 12 months, and then on month number 13th, your landlord comes up to you and says, hey man, there's no signature on this. Like, what are you doing? We don't have a contract. We're going to evict you. You can make an argument that, listen, I've made my payment for the last 12 months. So we have an implied contract. It's a little bit more difficult to prove, but that's why I mentioned below that, you want to make sure there's signatures. If you want to enter into a contract, you want to make sure that you're doing it in the right way. This is my conclusion here, but again, if you've ever been involved in an accident, you have any questions, we do free consultations. For me, really one of the biggest things is I want to make sure that our community has every answer that you possibly need. And, again, if you have car insurance and you're like, I have no idea what I have, can you please help me out? Our office number is below. It's 407-906-0500. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Adler, for having me here, and all of you for listening. And I look forward to seeing you guys hopefully in person one day soon. And if not, on the next Zoom call. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
No one has questions? I have a few.
Yeah, I was gonna say I got plenty of questions. Go ahead.
You want to go first?
Well, I have a few. I've got questions and I've got comments.
Yes.
Okay.
you were talking about earlier, you talked about a lot. Let me just say, you covered a lot. And I'm glad this is recorded because there's so many things that I'm not going to remember to ask you, but there's a lot that you said that are very, very important. And a lot of things that I didn't even know when I'm thinking I know all this stuff and I don't. So really, really great job, Lewis. Fantastic job. Great content. So you talked earlier about gap insurance, and I'm knocking on wood here, but for years and years and years and years, I never had gap insurance. I just purchased cars, and so we got them recently, but I was really upset because I felt like the dealerships were pushing me to get gap, and I was like, I don't understand why. If I'm buying the vehicle at a value where it is fair market value, and I'm imagining that my depreciation is going to be, not dramatic, right? And I know for example purposes that you gave, $8,000 is dramatic, but it depends on, a lot of factors. But let's just say that, of course, you drive it off the lot, you're going to lose, let's say $1,000, $2,000 within the first month. And then that's going to start to accrue at a certain percentage, over time, right? I just feel like the amount that they charge you for gap insurance at a dealership, and I don't know if you can get this from an insurance company or elsewhere, the way they try to roll that in is like, it's almost like you're paying for something that you almost will never use and you'll never get it back. And so my feelings with it prior, now it depends again on what kind of car you buy. And if you know about cars, you know about value and what cars retain value, what cars don't. I almost feel like it's more of a ploy than it is, really necessary. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So, it's a great question. It's a great statement. I lease a car. I lease a car. With my lease, I pay monthly, and with my lease, it's part of my lease. And so I have a Lexus, nothing fancy or whatever, but with the lease, it automatically, whether it's rolled into the payment so I really don't know what the price is if you actually go to the dealer and you actually buy gap insurance. But what I've seen it from clients. That example that I gave was an actual client, and
no kidding.
He owed a lot of money, and he was rear-ended, and the guy who hit him did not have insurance at all whatsoever. So this guy is now responsible for $8,000. So it's almost like one of those things, right? When you go to Best Buy and you buy a TV, or you go to Amazon and you buy electronic, like you look at, or even like when you go on flights, right? Every time, like, do you want to buy traveler's insurance? It's like $50. And you really have to weigh out the risk versus the benefits. I really don't know how much gap insurance is if you're actually going to the dealer. But it's just one of those things in case of, right? I've seen it on both sides. I've seen it where I have clients where, they get involved in an accident, it's maybe a nicer car where, again, property damage is $10,000 if you have basic coverage. But if you get, if you have a Mercedes where, the car might be $30,000, $40,000, and the car's a total loss, that $10,000 of property damage that someone else has is not going to cover your $30,000 of damage that you have. So you have to go through your own insurance. So again, and if you owe $20,000 or $25,000, but you'd be left with holding the bag with $5,000, you'd have to kind of weigh out the risk and the benefits. Is it, if you're buying a $3,000 or $4,000 car and you're paying it cash, you don't need gap insurance. It's really, it's more so if you're financing a car, you're financing it where, if you're going to be a little bit upside down or something like that, you're just protecting yourself against that risk. So, you could tell me probably better than I can, like how much is gap insurance typically when you were going to buy it?
So the deal that we got on my wife's car was actually the way that they rolled everything in. It ended up being like, I don't know, a couple dollars a month. It really wasn't extensive. It was when I went to go get my car. It was at a different dealership where I was like, I'm not paying this. Like, you guys are. It was like, I don't know, like $50 or $100. It was extensive, right? And it was like, no, I'd rather, just because I don't drive much. I work from home, and so for me, the risk. I felt like I could harbor the risk, whereas my wife is on the road, more often than not because she does real estate. And so for the price now, if they would have gave me something similar where it was going to be, let's say, I think it was like $2 to $4 or something like that, per month on top of everything, right? So like, and with everything else we were getting, it was like, it's fine. I'm not gonna miss it, right?
Yeah.
For that type of insurance, or assurance, I should say. But where it's like, I think for me, it was like they were trying to push it for like, I don't know, like 25 to $50 a month or something like that. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. Because over the course of the loan and over the course of time, it's like I'm losing money I'm not going to get back. So that's why. And again, I've never had it, right? But I mean, again, knock on wood, and all of my history, not something that I've had to worry about. So I appreciate now your examples were great, and it do make sense, especially when you're thinking about somebody else hitting you. Not so much. I'm always thinking about what I may or may not do, not so much what somebody else may or may not have in terms of their insurance coverages and whether or not they are insured. So that was a really eye-opening part right there. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. And at $100 a month or whatever it is, I probably would have opted out to. I mean, that seems pretty steep for, if
Right.
it's a couple bucks a month. But again, if it's $100 a month and, your payments are for, 3-4 years, something like that. Now you're talking about like $5,000. I would probably take my chances in that situation.
Right. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Going back on coverages. So as it relates to business owners, I know there's the basic coverage for car insurances, but if you consider a business owner and people know you're a business owner, or what would be the excuse me, what would be the recommended coverage in terms of both whether it's a personal car or business car that would be the proper cushion in the event of something happen that they may come outside of the coverage for the car, but yet going after the driver or the owner personally?
Sure. Great question. The quickest answer is as much as you could afford. And the reason why I say that is because when people know that you own a business, you're a target, and now with Google, very easy to research, so like I have friends that own businesses that, maybe when they first started out, they could only afford, $100,000 of bodily injury or uninsured motorist. And, fast forward 3-4 years, their business is doing good. And some of these guys have $1 million of coverage. And then now they're thinking, man, can I get an umbrella policy and things like that? Because, as you get more, as you earn more money, you're a bigger target. And people are going to see that, if God forbid, obviously, you injure someone else as a result of an accident, they're going to come at you. And, you want to protect yourself personally. So you want to make sure that whatever insurance coverage you have is going to be enough to satisfy, any type of injury claims that someone else might have against you or any of your employees. Because this also, right? If you have employees and they're in the course and scope of the business, then not only are they coming after, the employees, but they're going to come after the big boss. So, so that part of it is important as well. So I would say, the most direct answer is as much as you could afford. Again, kind of like what I mentioned before, you want to be protected. You want to protect yourself, your family, your business, but you also don't want to go bankrupt or go broke, having these crazy amounts of insurance that, you're spending. Again, if you could afford, the whatever you could afford, but if you're spending thousands of dollars a month on insurance and you're like, man, now I don't really have money to like survive or to eat, then that's not going to work either. So you just want to make sure that you have like a good balance of protection for the business. And then as you make more money, as the business grows more and more, then you could add more insurance later on.
Perfect. Thank you. As it relates to, I think you mentioned stack and unstack. Can you
Yes.
kind of, in layman's term, clarify that for us a little bit more when it comes to stack and unstack?
Such a good question. I don't even know if I mentioned stack or unstack. So I'm glad you're mentioning it. So such a good question. So when it comes to uninsured motorists, the way that stacked and unstacked works is if you have multiple cars in the household and you have uninsured motorists within your car insurance, then you want to make sure that your insurance policy is stacked. Because let me give you an example. I have a buddy of mine who had $10,000 of uninsured motorists, but he has 5 cars in the household and he got stacked uninsured motorists. So now his uninsured motorist is not 10,000, it's 10,000 times 5. So now his uninsured motorist has now been multiplied by 5. So his uninsured motorist would be $50,000 in that example. Same thing, again, I have other clients where, maybe their insurance is like 100,000, but they have, one for the husband, one for the wife. They have the policy stacked. So now the insurance policy or their insurance coverage is double. So now instead of being 100,000, what you're doing is you're stacking the two insurance policies. So what I would recommend as well is you want to stack those policies. If you have multiple cars in the household, you definitely want to stack those policies. But what I see also sometimes is let's say you're a single man, single woman, you have only one car in the household, and people use uninsured motorist stacked. You don't have to stack that policy. And as a matter of fact, you could do unstacked because you can't stack, you only have one vehicle, so you have nothing to stack. So you're actually paying too much insurance for coverage that is unnecessary. So if you have something that a UM insurance coverage that's stacked, you could definitely unstack it because there's no need for you to have that, the extra payment is probably not going to be that much in terms of payment, but it's again, something to look at and something to think about.
And that would be applicable to both cars under the same policy, not if you have two different.
Exactly. Both cars under the same policy. So, but if you have, I know a lot of parents do this. I see this a lot also. They're like, I don't want my child on my own insurance. They have their own insurance. So if they have, State Farm and the parents have Geico, those policies you can't stack. It's all under the same insurance company.
There was a question from one of our viewers. Can you go over again the difference between basics and full coverage, as we hear and we've experienced where we have an understanding that we have full coverage, but yet is that full coverage really a basic coverage compared to what we assume it to be?
Very good question also. So basic coverage, really my understanding of basic coverage is probably the same thing as full coverage. Basic coverage is exactly that. It's the most basic that you could have in the state of Florida. For whatever reason, I don't know who created this term full coverage, because it's insurance policies that insurance companies sell for cheap. Insurance companies sell it under the word full. And when you get it, you think you are the most protected individual on the planet. You're like, and I'm telling you, man, because I see this all the time with my clients. And when they have this, and they are so happy and so proud and like, I got this, man. I got full coverage. I'm good to go. They're so happy. And again, it's these insurance companies, these insurance adjusters that sell these policies and under this name full coverage, where they just shouldn't. So I see Mr. Enslin over here saying, yeah. So it's one of those things where, again, a lot of these insurance adjusters, when you buy insurance for the first time or you buy it from an agency, the agencies, their biggest job is churn and burn. Let's go ahead and sign you up for insurance right away. And let's go ahead and, let's go to the next one. Let's go to the next one. For them, it's a volume game. So if they could sign up, 1,000 of these basic policies, then, they're making their money every month, But again, for you as individuals, you're not as protected as you should be.
Another question in terms of multiple vehicle collision. Can you speak on that in terms of PIP coverage? Does it cover individuals in the immediate vehicle, or if they've been rear-ended and all the vehicles are involved in the accident?
So PIP covers, the way that PIP works is, let me just read that question again. Does PIP coverage go to cover the individual in the immediate vehicle or to all the vehicles involved in the accident? Okay, so PIP coverage covers, and I guess the question really is, Peggy, are you the driver or are you a passenger in a vehicle? Because that makes a difference as well. So I'm going to wait for Peggy to...
You are host. You may be able to unmute her.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Peggy.
Hi, thank you so much. If I has the driver rear-ended the vehicle in front of me and the vehicle in front of me rear-ended that person, can that vehicle the first vehicle that was rear-ended, or I should say, asked to be covered through my PIP insurance, or?
No, not at all. So that individual, your rear end, so the PIP only follows us, and that's it. So that you rear-ended a vehicle that rear-ended the car in front of them. So that first vehicle, in this example, your vehicle 3, and you rear-ended vehicle 2, and vehicle 1 is the first vehicle. The driver of vehicle 1 would be covered under their own PIP. Now, that driver of vehicle 1 would then have a bodily injury claim against you. So that would be the only way that person can collect against your own insurance company. In addition to that, that person can also make a property damage claim under your insurance policy as well. But the PIP would only follow that specific individual.
What about children or children residing in a household that are not biological children? Would they be covered under PIP driving that vehicle?
Do they live in that household?
Yes.
Are they relatives, or what's their relation to the people in that household?
Well, it's interesting. In the Haitian families, we have cousins of cousins of cousins, you know? So it's a kind of an indirect relationship, I guess you would say.
Yeah. I mean, you can make the argument that they are related and they should be covered under the relative part of PIP. It depends on the insurance company. Some of the smaller insurance companies are going to fight it until they can fight it, or until, you know, you could, until they're blue in the face. But then you could also file something that's called the PIP suit, so they can cover the benefits. So again, in that example, it's one of those situations where you kind of wait and see. If it's the bigger guys, the Geicos, the State Farms, the Progressives, it probably would cover that, those individuals, those minors under that policy, that household policy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay. You know how we get our credit reports for all our lenders when we have our credit involved. So how do we go about our reports for insurance claim?
Very good question, actually. So you can actually just call your own insurance company and tell them that you're requesting a report. So that's actually a good question. I've actually done that myself. And it's you know, if you call your own insurance company, they should be able to just give you any reports of any accidents that have happened under that policy. And then also their determination of liability as well. So if it's an accident that you had where you were not at fault, that claim would pop up, and you open up a claim, that claim would pop up on your insurance, but it would also should explain that you were not at fault for that accident, and vice versa. Also, if you had an accident or there was a claim open on that policy and you were assigned fault, it would say that you were at fault for that accident.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think I also had another question when it comes to rental car insurance. Any thoughts on that in terms of, a lot of time you offer insurance? Well, I guess what is the law? Because a lot of time at the rental insurances, they'll tell you that your policy does not cover the rental car. So they want you to buy their insurance.
Correct. So again, this is another one that you got to kind of figure out which one works best. A lot of times, and I have, I mean, probably like 10 or 15 cases right now against like Enterprise and like different car rental companies. Some of them, the person renting the car got the rental insurance from the rental company, Enterprise or Hertz. Some of them, they decided, hey, I'm going to go with my own. So in the situation when they go with their own insurance company is going to cover that, you know, the damages and all that. So really, again, it really kind of falls on number one, what kind of insurance you have. If you have the basic coverage, or it's only $10,000 in property damage, and you cause someone else's accidents, and you just have basic coverage, and let's say that, you know, the rental cars are usually a newer car, so there might be a car that's, you know, worth $10,000 or $15,000. In that situation, if you have basic coverage, then any damage to that car would be your responsibility if you cause the accident. And now you might have a $15,000 bill for maybe a car that you totaled that, you know, you could have prevented it if you got their insurance. So it's one of those things, you know, we talked about, you know, before with JP, of you gotta kind of, figure out whether is it worth it to get their insurance? Are they asking, if you're renting a car for a day, but they're asking for like $100 for your insurance, and and you have really good coverage with your own insurance company, I'm always gonna listen. I'll take my own insurance, and I'll let my insurance, cover me in this situation. But if you have like a lower type of insurance, and and this is a nicer car or something like that you're renting, then maybe I would opt for the rental insurance. For me, when I look at insurance, whether and I know this when when we were moving and we had to like rent one of those budget trucks or something like that. I took their insurance. I think it was like $30 for the day. And I know that budget truck or whatever is probably like 30 or 40,000. I'm like, listen, God forbid, if anything happens to it, I'm going to give you back the keys and I'm going to let you guys take care of your own truck. So, for me personally, I always, opt for, in that situation using their insurance. But if it's like, I'm renting a car for whatever reason, then I'm going to probably use my own insurance.
Now, Attorney Berk, can we say on that same note, can we say if when we purchase our policy, we should make sure that we have the rental car provisions in there? Is that one thing, or is it just if we have just status quo full coverage, or can we say that we should get the rental and the provision as well?
So that's another good question. So again, it's one of those things where, having rental is definitely a good thing to have, because, if they're determining liability and things like that, if you only have one car and for a fact that you always need to go somewhere that you cannot go. We live in Florida, we're not like in Miami or places you could walk. We're in Central Florida where you need a car to go everywhere. Rental coverage, makes sense. And I don't think rental coverage for your car insurance, I don't think it's a lot of money. It might be, a few bucks a month or something like that. So it's one of those coverages where it does make sense to add, because if you get involved in a car accident, the easiest way, it's always going to be to go with your own insurance company to determine, you'll pay a deductible, and, going through your own insurance, you're going to have, figured that part out, and it could be a fast process. If you go with the person who hits you, or if it's one of these situations where, it's he said versus she said, I had the green light, no, I had the green light, there's no witnesses, it's going to take a little bit more time to determine liability, and you have to go with that the defendant's insurance company, and it's going to take a little bit longer to figure out liability. Again, it's going to slow down the process. And now what I'm seeing more and more now with coronavirus, a lot of these companies are not even sending adjusters to take a look at your car. They're telling you, send me a picture. Send me pictures or videos, and we'll take a look at it that way, because coronavirus, we're not sending. So the process is a little bit slower already. So rental car, especially now, if you need a vehicle right away, it's a good thing to add to your insurance policy.
I've got another question.
Thank you.
So I want to veer off of the cars for a minute. You talked about contracts, business contracts. So you're saying that even if you have a contract that is signed, that is agreed upon, but maybe no money is exchanged. So all three of these things have to happen. And you mentioned, I don't know if I got it right, but you mentioned at least three things that need to happen in order for, let's say, for the contract to be ratified or to be solidified, and that it could be, I guess it could be arbitrated or not fully valid if all three of these things don't happen. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I want to make sure I understand it. Because in my mind, I typically have website contracts that I, have with customers where, I send it out, they send it back, they sign, I sign, they've got a copy, I've got a copy, and then, money's going or whatever because invoices are done. But, if in case that, let's say, I didn't get my deposit or something like that, does that mean that just because I got the contract signed that the contract isn't truly valid because no money was exchanged?
Exactly. So you need to have, you have offer, acceptance, consideration. I'm offering you $1,000 for a website. And we agree on it. Everything's good to go, but there's no consideration. So technically, no consideration, meaning that I didn't give you the money, and the consideration that you're giving me is you're giving me a website. So if I didn't give you money, you didn't give me a website, then really there's been no contract that's been created, right? Because you didn't perform and I didn't perform. You know, we signed a contract, we signed a piece of paper, but there's nothing, no one's enforcing it. Now, you know, as soon as I give you the money and then now you don't make my website, you know, we have a time frame, or, you know, this is again where the terms really come into play. I give you the money. You have 30 days to create this website. It's been 30 days. I'm like, JP, what's going on, man? I thought we had an agreement, and you still haven't done the website. You still haven't even commenced, you know, creating the website or anything like that. Now you just breached the contract, and now I can make a claim against you to get my money back. But if you just have a piece of paper that's signed, that's great. You know, we had the meeting of the minds. You know, we negotiated the deal. You know, you told me, listen, Louis, like, I'm going back and forth. Listen, Louis, I could do $1,000. And I'm like, JP, come on, man, let's do it for 800. And you're like, nah, man, I can do 1,000. I'm like, all right, JP, let's do it for 1,000. Perfect. And we agree. Okay. You offered me $1,000. I'm like, you know what? I'll agree. Let's do it. But that's it. Nothing else has been completed. So there's no consideration there. So there's really no contract, even though you have something signed. There's really no consideration because you didn't perform, I didn't perform. And if no one performs, then there's really nothing there.
So the consideration has to be done on both parts.
Exactly.
I see.
Exactly.
Great
And
point.
on that same note with what JP just said, the other way around, what happened if that's in a lease? You have an agreement. I mean, the person was in a lease already. The lease is due for renewal, but for the renewal, we need a new signature for the new terms. But the person keep paying, but refused to sign the lease.
So very good question, because I think that's happening a lot nowadays as well. So, you know, so the question is, if the person, and this kind of goes down to, like, you know, instead of contracts, it's more like landlord tenant. And in that situation, if the person keeps on paying, you've now created, and I'm trying to go back into like land, because this is not more landlord tenant type law. You've now created like a month-to-month tendency. And what that does is, if you keep accepting the payments, then that's a contract in itself, because you're not saying anything. Now, if you stop accepting the payments and you're like, hey, you know, you have to evict or you have to go, we don't have a contract, and they still, you know, try to pay you, you still don't accept the payments. Now, and again, there's no contract, you could start going through the eviction process. But the issue there is, as soon as they make the payment and you accept the payment, you cash the payment, and they do it again, and you accept the payment and you cash the payment, now, based on your actions, you're essentially kind of implying that we do have an agreement, because listen, I'm paying you, you're taking the money. And, you know, so in that situation, you would have something that's called like a month-to-month tendency.
So following that, in our community, we have a lot of meeting of the minds, or verbal meeting of the minds, where it's a handshake, you know, that's understood. But yet, as business owners trying to transition to more proper protocol, signatures, written agreements, share your thoughts and passion on that, in terms of, hey, however small or big it is, if you have an agreement, whether it should be in writing or continue with the verbal meeting of the minds.
This is it's one of those situations where it's very, very interesting topic. It happens also in the Spanish community all the time, and it happens. I'm Jewish also. It happens also in the Jewish community. It happens in every community, you know, where, you know, listen, even when we're you know, doing business with our friends, right? It happens a lot when we're doing business with our friends. And there's some relationships that you can do that with, and you never have an issue ever. You know, there's people that have partnerships for 20, 30, 40 years, and it's all based on a handshake, and there's nothing that's ever written. Now, the question is that the right way to do it? Now, you know, if you want to have an enforceable contract, you need to have it in writing. There's just no way about it. If it's a big deal that you're trying to, you know, make sure that it goes through, in order for the courts to make the process as easy and as smooth as possible, you want to have it in writing. Because, and again, it's not to say that you can't have, you know, verbal agreements, and, you know, it goes back to, the actions that people are kind of, portraying and, implying and things like that. So can you have verbal agreement? Sure. But when it comes, once one person kind of, goes against that agreement or breaches that agreement and you want to go after them or sue them, your argument is going to be much harder later on. So it's easier. And again, it happens in every single community where, and especially when we're doing business with our loved ones, with our friends, with family, it's very easy for us to be like, listen, let's do a handshake. Let's do it that way. And it'll be good to go. But it goes back to what I mentioned before. You got to think exit strategy. And if you ever think there's going to be an exit strategy, you want to make sure that it's in writing so that way you're always going to be protected.
Thank you. So a follow-up to that, mentioning exit strategy. So entering into a partnership, business partnership.
Yeah.
And typically you may have common agreements going forward, but no one knows 2 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, what's going to happen. What is your recommendation in terms of as you enter into a partnership or some type of collaboration to make sure to prevent or avoid some derailment or to amicably transition or separate in terms of growth or buildings, if you will, with different parties within the group, the partnership, the business?
Yeah. I think, again, when you're entering into these agreements, it's so important to think exit strategy right off the bat. To think worst case scenario. Just like we think worst case scenario with our car insurance, we should think worst case scenario with every aspect of business, of anything that we do, really. And it's some people might think that it's a negative way of thinking, but you also want to be protected because you never know what could happen. So if you think right off the bat exit strategy, so let's say you have clinics and you open up a business and you bring in a business partner and you open up 3, 4, 5, 10 clinics, right? And then you're like, man, this is not working out. Well, who gets the clinics? Are the clinics just going to be split up 50-50? Who put in the capital originally? Did you put in the capital? Did he just put in sweat equity? Does he get the same amount? Is this 50-50? Is it 70-30? Is it 60-40? So you got to think all these different things right from the get-go. So that way, there may never be an exit strategy. This might be the greatest, best relationship, best business partnership that you ever have. And you may never even have to use those exit strategies. But if you do, you want to make sure that you're prepared.
One more, in terms of identification. So a lot of times we see that in the contracts. So in layman's term, what does that mean? And how do you make sure that you utilize that to your advantage, or at least for both parties?
Say that again for identification.
The identification clause that's typically you see in all contracts.
So indemnification clauses are also really important. And this kind of comes into play with, and again, I have cases like this or clients like this right now where, if someone is injured as a result of a product or as a result of someone else's negligence, or, think about it like this. If someone falls in a parking lot at a shopping plaza, but that parking lot is in front of Publix and people go after, Publix for that, right? But Publix, they sue Publix and all that. But Publix has an agreement with the plaza owner that says, if someone ever sues me, I have the right to indemnify myself by going after you, the plaza owner. So again, it's one of those situations where you want to protect yourself by, making sure that if you're entering an agreement with someone that is either, a subcontractor or someone that is working, and this happens a lot. Indemnification clauses, I think it happens a lot in relationships like construction and, things where you have contractors and subcontractors and subcontractors. So if one of the subcontractors, does something or gets injured and then they file a lawsuit against the builder says, it wasn't me, man. I wasn't the one that hired the subcontractor. You got to go after the contractor. So then the builder might be able to go after the contractor. So that's why you want to have, those terms clear in terms of indemnification clauses.
Thank you. Well, it's 8 o'clock, I'm not sure if anyone else has any questions, but it was very insightful, uh, eye opener as well with the information provided. Again, I want to thank you for your time, Attorney Berk, and everyone else here who attended who came on board to connect with the Greater Haitian Chamber of Commerce. I ask you to, if you're not a member, if you know someone who has a business, a simple citizen who has disposable time, I ask you, encourage them to get involved, connect with us so we can grow our footprints, get more market share, if you will. And if you do are a member, I encourage you to get involved, participate, be part of our committees so we can further push the agenda and also extend our footprint as well in the community. JP, anything you'd like to share? Any closing notes, Landra, Milan, any of our advisors?
Yeah, I would say to everybody that's here, both here on the live and those that are watching on the replay, be sure to check out our website, as we have had other events that are like this, especially virtual ones, and we will start to release them they're on our YouTube page, so check those out. And then any questions, be sure to use the contact form, and we'd love to hear from you. Oh, and lastly, to Lewis, great job, fantastic.
Yeah, Dr. B. All right, Mr. Attorney Beck did a fantastic job, and like we discussed it in a board meeting, with the expectation that we have for this Let's Connect tonight. I'm looking forward to see if I can get the audio, if I can have it broadcasting this Sunday. So hopefully we can connect this and have it broadcasting with Radio Panic. And then that will be on us also with GAC. I will share your phone number, Attorney Beck. I know several individuals in this community, they need you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Before we end, would you make me host again, please, Attorney Berk? Participant,
participant.
Good. It happens. Thank you. So once again, if there's no other question, Attorney Berk, thank you again for your time. Thank you for connecting. And I hope to have you more engaged as well with the Chamber and our community. Thank you for investing in the Greater Haitian American Chamber of Commerce. So please, again, thank you, everyone. And good night.
Night. Good night.